What's good, YouTubers and YouTubettes? This is JB Sports, back again with another one. Gonna talk about the most unpredictable fighter in boxing history. That being WBC heavyweight champion, Tyson the Gypsy King Fury, who is also universally recognized as the Ring Magazine heavyweight champion and the lineal heavyweight champion. Now, when he defeated Vladimir Klitschko, who had a long, dominant reign in the heavyweight division, but that old jab and grab technique he did, leaning on his opponents, tying them out, man, that seemed to be something that no opponent could solve. But Tyson Fury, who up to that point had really never showed to be on that level, because he hadn't had the opponents or the resume to show that to be on that level, came and pulled off one of the biggest upsets in heavyweight history. I wouldn't put it up there with Ali against Liston, but it was similar in that regard, because Cassius Clay never showed before the Sonny Liston fight that he was on that level of a Sonny Liston. The guys that he beat, he got dropped by what's that guy over there in London dropped him? That guy wasn't nowhere on the level of a Sonny Liston. And he's struggling in some other fights early on. He's always able to get the victory, and he did a lot of brash, trash talking, predicting what round he would stop a guy in, and that came to fruition. So he was able to build his name up, build his brand up, and he's able to get into the rankings. I think he became the #1 contender for Sonny Liston's belt. I think at one time it was he was #2, and what's the guy? I can't remember his name, man. The heavyweight champion that Sonny Liston took his title from. His name escapes me right now, but he was #1. You know, Sonny Liston ran through him like a hot knife through butter. Took his title away, knocked him out in the first round, I believe. They had a rematch, and I think he stopped him even early in the first round. Floyd Patterson, who's a Hall of Fame fighter. I don't know why I couldn't remember his name, but he was #1 at the time. I think Cassius Clay was #2. So once, no. I got it wrong. Floyd Patterson was the champion. Sonny Liston was #1 at the time, and Cassius Clay was #2. That's how Sonny Liston was able to get the belt. So once Sonny Liston defeated Floyd Patterson, Cassius Clay became #1 ranked heavyweight. So he was in prime position to get the title shot. He ultimately pulled one of the biggest upsets in boxing history. With all that being said, after his historic win over Vladimir Klitschko, he took a 2.5-year sabbatical, dealing with depression, being a dope fiend, had a whole lot of personal issues, personal demons that he was dealing with that pulled him away from the sport of boxing. Came back after Deontay Wilder called him, gave him a little bit of a pep talk, and told him to pull himself up by his bootstraps and return to the sport of boxing, because he still has a lot to offer the sport of boxing. And he was able to take that advice from the Bronze Bomber, get himself back in shape, have 2 tune-ups, and get a crack at the WBC heavyweight champion, Deontay the Bronze Bomber Wilder. That was a great fight. Great fight. One of the best heavyweight title fights in boxing history. I'm talking about the first fight. Now everybody started talking about that third fight was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, heavyweight title fight in boxing history. But that first fight was great too, just because of that 12th round. You know, there was a lot of inaction going on in the first half of the fight, even at times in the second half of the fight. But that 12th round, man, pretty much was one of the greatest 12th rounds in boxing history. The punch that he got up from, and he was able to come back and actually get the momentum at the end of that round, started hurting Deontay Wilder in that round, started backing up Deontay Wilder, became the hunter after he got hunted down like a ravaged dog when he got hit with that right hand. So he was able to show that he had the heart, he had the will, he had the tenacity to face adversity, stare adversity eye to eye, and don't blink. He was able to get back up and come back and end up getting a draw. Now at that point, everybody was assuming that it was going to be a rematch, especially when Deontay Wilder said that he wanted to give Tyson Fury a rematch. He wasn't trying to pursue a fight with Anthony Joshua no more, as Anthony Joshua turned down $50 million before the Tyson Fury first fight. But Tyson Fury did what he had been doing and shown a pattern of doing. Unpredictable. Didn't take the rematch, signed with ESPN, and then he took another 2 tune-ups against Tom Schwartz and Otto Wallin. Now, the Otto Wallin fight turned out to be a little bit tougher than expected. Opened up a big cut above Tyson Fury's eye. And that fight could have been easily stopped. And that could have put a kibosh on the rematch with Deontay Wilder, as he was scheduled, pretty much had that contract already lined up for him to take on Deontay Wilder in the rematch after the Otto Wallin fight. He was able to overcome adversity in that. And he was able to back up Otto Wallin, bully Otto Wallin, and win a unanimous decision to set the stage for the rematch with Deontay Wilder. Fights Deontay Wilder the second time, to the surprise of many people in the sport of boxing, including yours truly. He demolished Deontay Wilder. He dominated Deontay Wilder and stopped Deontay Wilder in the 7th round, as Deontay Wilder's trainer, Mark Breland, waved that white flag and the fight was stopped. After that fight, it was already in the contract there was going to be a third fight. That whoever won the second fight would get a 60-40 deal in the third fight. But what did Tyson Fury do? Being unpredictable as he's been, as he's got a pattern of doing, he tried to swerve Deontay Wilder, tried to set the stage for an undisputed fight with Anthony Joshua, knowing that he had an ironclad contract with Deontay Wilder. Knowing he had an ironclad contract with Deontay Wilder, Deontay Wilder sued him, took him to court, and the arbitrator ruled in Deontay Wilder's favor and forced a third fight. Was able to defeat Deontay Wilder in one of the greatest heavyweight title fights in boxing history, and now he's the recognized #1 heavyweight in the division. The WBC said before the third Fury-Wilder fight that they would have to, the winner of that fight would have to face off against Fury-Whyte, who at that time was the #1 contender in the WBC and the WBC interim champion, as he was able to get that title back off of Alexander Povetkin after losing in the first fight by a dramatic knockout. Got put to sleep like Povetkin had given him some NyQuil. But Fury-Whyte was at that point fed up with the WBC. He was fed up for getting pushed aside. He was fed up being on the outside looking in. So he sued the WBC, trying to force their hand. And then he wanted to be in a better position to get a higher percentage of the purse split. And here we are now, ladies and gentlemen. Tyson Fury and his team is now saying, okay, while you in arbitration with the WBC, we don't know what the purse split gonna be. We're not gonna sit idly by while you handle that. That's not gonna get ruled on until March. So in the meantime, we're gonna take a voluntary with no WBC title at stake. Putting the pressure on Fury-Whyte to accept what they believe he's worth. That's 20%. Fury-Whyte feels he should get 45% of the purse split. So basically, if it's up to the Fury-Whyte and his team, they would be a 55-45 split in favor of Tyson Fury. If it's up to Tyson Fury and his team, it will be an 80-20 split in favor of Tyson Fury. So that's why we're in arbitration right now, trying to figure out what's going to be the purse split. So when the WBC a couple of weeks ago ordered that Tyson Fury would have to face Fury-Whyte next and they should begin negotiations, that wasn't nothing but smoke and mirrors, basically. That wasn't nothing but propaganda, because how can you negotiate when you don't know the purse split? Frank Warren, Tyson Fury's promoter, did an interview with IFL TV, and he basically stated, hey, we can't do no negotiations. We can't negotiate anything because we don't know what the purse split. We believe it should be 20%. Their side believe it should be 45% for the purse for Fury-Whyte. So we can't agree on anything because we don't know the purse split. So in the meantime, we've got word that the arbitration ruling won't come down to at least March. Tyson Fury has only fought once in 22 months. And we're not going to keep him inactive again. He's going to have a busy 2022. He wants to fight at least 3 times. He wants to fight 3 times in 2022. At the very worst case scenario, 2 times in 2022. We're not going to start the year off getting his next fight getting pushed back due to something that we have nothing to do with. Ain't our problem. That's Fury-Whyte problem. He has a problem with the WBC. Y'all handle it. But in the meantime, we're going to stay active. It's basically what Frank Warren said. Frank Warren said we got 4 opponents in mind. I'm not going to reveal the opponents right now in this interview, but we got 4 opponents in mind. And I've done a little bit digging. I think, and from what I'm hearing, these are the 4 opponents. It ain't what I think, it's what I heard. It's the most likely 4 opponents that could be on tap to take on Tyson Fury in March of 2022. Andy Ruiz Jr., Joseph Parker, Caballero. Remember, they were talking about him when he was trying to get out that contract with the Deontay Wilder 3rd fight. He was talking about going to the UK and fighting Caballero. Caballero is back in the picture. Caballero and Robert Helenius. Those are the 4 opponents that are said to be on the short list to take on Tyson Fury in March of 2022. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Now, what I think is really happening, I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. I think there's a lot of posturing going on. I think the ultimate goal of Frank Warren, Bob Arum, who represent Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury is part of this. You know, he's the fighter, and he's got to sign off on this. I think the main goal is to force the WBC to make Tyson Fury the franchise champion. Let me repeat myself. I think the end game from Team Fury is to force the WBC to make Tyson Fury the franchise champion. At the very least, they want to force Dillian Whyte to drop his arbitration case against the WBC and take the 20% purse split to take on Tyson the Gypsy King Fury. Because they don't want the arbitration to rule and wait and don't fight until April or May. You know, we don't know what's going on with this pandemic. You know, this stuff might get shut down again in the UK, so they might have to come over here to the United States. So you don't know what the venue situation is going to be. So there's a whole lot of variables in play here. So they don't want to be stuck with their hand in the cookie jar. You know what I'm saying? They don't want to be up shit creek without a paddle, basically. So they want to have all their ducks in a row. They want to have all their I's dotted and T's crossed. So they're not going to sit idly by, basically. So they don't want to maybe take a chance of it going to a purse bid. Eddie Hearn winning the purse bid and taking Tyson Fury to the zone and fighting under Matchroom Boxing as a lead promoter. They don't want to be a part of that. Bob Arum witnessed that in the Teofimo Lopez case. And he's understanding he's lost another purse bid in the Michael Carlin Lee Wood case, that Lee Wood fight that the zone outbidded him for. Not the zone, but Eddie Hearn outbidded him for. And therefore, it's going to be shown on the zone, not ESPN or ESPN platform. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. But if Tyson Fury becomes the WBC franchise champion, he'll be able to move without obligations. He'll be able to chase the big fights with the Usyk. Or even have a big fight with Andy Ruiz, which would do, I think, good numbers over here in the U.S. if they put it on pay-per-view, ESPN pay-per-view, as a lot of Hispanic boxing fans will definitely buy that fight between Tyson Fury and Andy Ruiz Jr. But the question I asked the 4 opponents that are being named as possible opponents, why would Andy Ruiz, Joseph Parker ain't fighting him. Joseph Parker and Tyson Fury are best friends, best buddies. But that didn't stop Terence Crawford and Sean Porter from fighting. But I don't even think they were close as Tyson Fury and Joseph Parker is. Because Joseph Parker helped Tyson Fury get ready for the Deontay Wilder 3rd fight. He's part of Tyson Fury's team. Training buddy and everything, sparring buddy and everything. So he's already said he's not going to fight Tyson Fury because Tyson Fury is a friend. But when Andy Ruiz Jr., Caballero, and Robert Helenius, what's the incentive for them to fight Tyson Fury with no belt on the line? They beat Tyson Fury, and they don't have no belt to show for it. Tyson Fury can still take the belt after the loss and go fight Dillian Whyte and put his title on the line. So what would be the benefit for him? I guess they could say they're now the lineal heavyweight champion because they beat the guy that's the lineal heavyweight champion. I'm not even sure they will be the Ring Magazine heavyweight champion by beating Tyson Fury. Would they elevate Usyk as the Ring Magazine heavyweight champion since he has 3 of the 4 belts? You know what I'm saying? So what is the incentive for those guys to fight Tyson Fury with no belt? So I think this is a lot of posturing. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And I think this is a lot of the old shell game. You know, the old shell game they play. What shell is the ball under? I'm gonna move these shells around and stuff, and you're gonna pick the shell that you think the ball is under. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving parts. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. But let me know your thoughts about Tyson Fury endgame being WBC franchise champion. Let me know your thoughts if you think that's the case. Let me know your thoughts if you think Tyson Fury's team is just trying to leverage Dillian Whyte to drop the arbitration case against the WBC and accept the 20% purse split, which Elliot Hearn has said he's not going to accept, saying that the commercial value of Dillian Whyte is high. He should accept that. But Frank Warren just said in the IFL TV interview that Dillian Whyte made $300,000 in his last fight. And as we know, Tyson Fury probably made at least $10 million in his last fight with Deontay Wilder. Well over $10 million in his last fight with Deontay Wilder. So if that's the case, 80-20% split sounds a little bit more like it if you base that on the last purse that each fighter had. And the WBC in that regard, in that case, actually goes by the last 3 fights, the purse of the last 3 fights of each fighter. And that's how they base their purse split on. If that's the case, 80-20 is more closer to what Dillian Whyte made in his last fight in comparison to what Tyson Fury made in his last 3 fights. And his last 3 fights were on pay-per-view against Deontay Wilder. And the second fight did 850,000 pay-per-view buys. I think the first fight did over 300,000 pay-per-view buys, and the second fight did around 600 to 650,000 pay-per-view buys. So Ed Hearn has said that Dillian Whyte is a big time pay-per-view attraction over there in the UK. But if he making $300,000 in the fight with Alexander Povetkin, how big of a pay-per-view star is he? You can chalk it up to the pandemic, maybe slowing down the sales and stuff like that. Maybe that did play a part in it, but they're going by the average of his last 3 fights. If you go by the average of his last 3 fights, he is not the draw, not anywhere close to being the draw. Not anywhere close to accumulating the type of revenue that Tyson Fury did in his last 3 fights. You can say, well, Tyson Fury had a hell of a dance partner, Deontay Wilder, and Dillian Whyte fighting Alexander Povetkin and fighting Derek Chisora in the rematch, stuff like that. Those guys don't have the same cachet as a Deontay Wilder. And the United States pay-per-view market is at a higher level than the UK pay-per-view market, which charge their customers around, what, $20 for the pay-per-view, as in the average pay-per-view for United States fight is around $80. So that's the difference. But like I said, if it ain't making dollars, it ain't making sense. So it's, at the end of the day, you got to look at what each fighter brings to the table. Let me know your thoughts and hit the like button if you like the content of this video. Subscribe to JB Sports, the man, the myth, the legend, and I holla.